Darius Crowe walked through the graffiti-lined streets of Brooklyn, his little sister Zaya holding his hand. The evening was quiet, bathed in the golden glow of the sunset. But something felt off. Shadows stretched just a little too long, the world unusually silent. That night, the sky split open. A hum, like distant thunder, turned into a crackle of energy, and then light. A rift tore through the heavens, glowing white and violet as shadows spilled into the streets below. From the crack came creatures, monstrous, jagged beings glowing with violet cracks, Wraith Beasts. They tore through buildings and streets, and then they turned toward Zaya. Darius didn't think. He acted. He stepped in front of his sister, fists clenched, as the beasts charged. Fear coursed through his veins, but something deeper stirred within him. Energy began to crackle at his fingertips, dark and alive. The glow of shadow energy flickered into existence, pulsing like fire. And then his hands were claws, forged from shadows. Without understanding how, he struck back, cutting into the beast with a force he didn't know he possessed. The fight ended, and the creature crumbled into mist. For a moment, there was silence. But then the ground trembled. The rift, now larger, pulsed violently, pulling everything toward it. Before Darius could react, Zaya screamed. Her small form was lifted off the ground, shadowy tendrils wrapping around her as she was dragged into the rift. Darius lunged, reaching for her, but it was too late. She was gone. Everything fell quiet. Darius dropped to his knees, surrounded by broken furniture and shadows. His heart pounded as he stared into the glowing void, still alive in his living room. It called to him, humming with power and terror, and he knew there was only one choice. Without hesitation, he stepped through. The rift dimension was unlike anything Darius had ever seen. Floating platforms of shattered stone hovered in mid-air, bathed in violet mist. Glowing symbols pulsed faintly in the darkness, while cracks of light spread across the fractured landscape. It was a world of shadows, a world where light and darkness were one. A voice called out to him. From the mist emerged a being of shadows, a massive figure with glowing purple eyes and swirling energy. Its voice was deep and ancient. The entity introduced itself as Umbra, a guardian of the rift. Umbra explained that Darius had been chosen. The rift had gifted him its power, but it came with a cost. He was now the Shadow Vanguard, the only one capable of fighting back against the darkness that threatened both their world and his. Training began. Darius learned a shadow step, teleporting short distances in bursts of energy, leaving faint trails of darkness behind him. He mastered Shadow Morph, summoning weapons and armor forged from his energy. He created shadow clones, echoes of himself that fought alongside him. And finally, Umbra taught him the Rift Strike, a devastating power that tore through space itself, launching attacks through glowing shadow portals. But power came with consequences. Overusing his abilities drained him, sapping his strength and mind. The shadows whispered to him, clouding his thoughts. Once, as exhaustion overtook him, he saw Zaya. She cried out for help, her voice distorted and far away. Darius dropped to his knees, overwhelmed. The cost of failure loomed larger than ever. To regain control, Darius meditated, breathing deeply as glowing shadow symbols floated around him. The energy calmed, bending to his will. For the first time, Darius felt the rift's power without it controlling him. Umbra warned him of what lay ahead. At the heart of the rift waited the Void King, the source of the Wraith Beasts, and the architect of Zaya's capture. Determined, Darius ventured deeper into the rift. Floating platforms led him to the Void King's fortress, a massive structure glowing faintly with dark energy. On the way, he faced Void Spawn elites, armored beasts that struck with terrifying power. He fought through their numbers alone, his shadow blade cutting through the dark. Then came the Shadow Guardian, a colossal warrior forged from mist and shadows. Darius leapt into the air, his energy crackling as he struck with everything he had, bringing the Guardian to its knees. At last he reached the throne of the Void King. The air trembled as the massive shadow figure emerged, jagged and glowing, holding a staff of crackling dark energy. The Void King offered Darius a choice: join him, rule the shadows, or lose Zaya forever. But Darius refused. The rift erupted around him as his energy surged, and for the first time he transformed. His body was enveloped in shadow, growing into the towering form of the Shadow Avatar. Dark energy pulsed from him, glowing like a star in the void. The final battle shook the rift itself. Darius, in his Shadow Avatar form, clashed with the Void King, energy bursting through every strike. The ground shattered beneath them, the mist swirling like a storm. Finally, with one final blow, Darius struck the Void King down. The shadow figure crumbled into mist, its power shattered. As the rift began to collapse, Darius raced to Zaya. She was trapped in a crystalline prison, her small form glowing faintly. With a surge of energy, Darius shattered the crystal, pulling her into his arms. The rift cracked and shook, light breaking through as the world fell apart. Darius ran, carrying Zaya, leaping from platform to platform as everything behind them disintegrated into light and shadow. They emerged into the quiet of Brooklyn at sunrise. The city skyline glowed golden in the distance, and for the first time, peace returned. Darius and Zaya stood side by side on a rooftop, looking out over their home. Zaya smiled, holding her brother's arm tightly, and Darius gazed out, knowing the rift's power still lingered within him. That night, Darius stood alone on another rooftop, the moon casting light over the city. He looked out over the streets, his shadow powers pulsing faintly beneath his skin. The rift was gone, but the shadows remained. And as Darius Crowe watched over the sleeping city, he embraced his role as its silent protector. Darius Crowe, the Shadow Vanguard.